This is the short video lecture regarding species interactions, ecological succession, and population control. Listed on the screen in front of you are the key terms associated with this chapter. A couple of the items in blue I would like to draw your attention to as terms that you should definitely be familiar with, including carrying capacity, commensalism, mutualism, parasitism, predator-prey relationships, range of tolerance, resource partitioning, resilience, and environmental resistance. First, let's focus on a case study about the southern sea otter. This is considered to be a species in recovery. The sea otter is the largest member of the weasel family, yet it is the smallest marine mammal in North America. It is listed as a threatened species due to its population decline. Their territory used to stretch from Oregon to the southern tip of California. Now they only live in about 13% of their historical range. Because they rely on their dense water-resistant fur to insulate them against the cold, any exposure to oily substances can lead to hypothermia and death. At one time, there were over 13,000 to 20,000 sea otters that lived off the waters in the coast of California. By 1938, only 50 remained. In 1977, they were declared threatened under the Endangered Species Act. So there was almost a 40-year period in which a very small population of sea otters existed off the coast of California. In 2013, their numbers recovered to about 2,900, but yet they are far below what their historical numbers were. Sea otters are considered a keystone species because they feed on sea urchins, and without the sea otters, the sea urchins and other kelp-eating species would destroy the kelp forests. Kelp forests help reduce coastal erosion, are a source of carbon storage of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and they help moderate climate change. Hence, the presence of the sea otter is necessary in order to help keep the sea urchin populations managed so that the sea urchins don't overeat the kelp forests. Scientists also study sea otters as an indicator species of nearshore ecosystem health. Since the sea otters feed and live near the coastline, they're often the first predators exposed to pollutants and pathogens washed down from the inland areas, such as a microbial toxin known as microcystin. So they're an indicator species that help us understand what's going on in the inland areas with the waterways that feed into the coastline with the estuaries and whether or not there's any impact going on. An interesting fact about the sea otter is that they often rest together in groups and float around on the surface of the water. When they rest in these groups, there could be over 1,000 of them floating together. In order to keep drifting away from each other, they literally wrap themselves up in seaweed from one sea otter to the next and float around in something that resembles a raft. So, a term that has been coined to describe this practice of a group of resting otters is called a raft. In order for the sea otter to be delisted from the Endangered Species Act, the population would need to exceed more than 3,000 for 3 consecutive years. For the first time in 2016, the population was actually greater than 3,000. So there is the potential that if this continues to stay the population number, that this species could be delisted under the Endangered Species Act. But the good news is that the Marine Mammal Protection Act also protects the sea otter. The Marine Mammal Protection Act states that marine mammals should not be permitted to diminish beyond the point at which they cease to be a significant functioning element in the ecosystem. Since the sea otter is a keystone species, the Marine Mammal Protection Act will require that the population has to exceed 8,400 animals in California alone before they no longer meet the requirements for protection. So, how do species interact with one another? The 5 ways are listed on your screen: competition, predation, parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. And all of these affect resource use and population size. Let's look at competition first and several specific ways in which species compete with one another. The first is intra-specific competition. This is competition between members of the same species for the same resources. Interspecific competition is competition between members of two or more different species for food, space, or any other limited resources. Interference competition is where a species limits the access of the other species to a resource via a territory. Hence, one species may limit another's access to the same resource regardless of its abundance. That is interference competition. Exploitation competition is when species have equal access to a resource, but they differ in how fast or efficiently they can exploit it. So the species that can exploit that resource more quickly is going to outcompete the species that basically is slower at getting to that resource or food item. The competitive exclusion principle is a rule that applies when two or more species occupy the exact same niche. A niche consists of an organism's relationship with its environment, such as what the organism eats, where it lives, and its range of tolerance for various environmental factors. If two species occupy identical niches, competition will eliminate one of them. Again, this is known as the competitive exclusion principle. Now, some species will actually adjust so that they're not in exactly identical niches with other species, and we call this resource partitioning. This figure depicts certain species of warblers that are sharing the wealth, let's say, via resource partitioning. There are 5 species of insect-eating warblers that live in the spruce forest in the United States. Each species minimizes the competition for food with others by spending at least half of its feeding time in a distinct portion of the spruce tree as shaded on these diagrams. The Blackburnian warbler tends to feed on the top and the perimeter of the tree. The black-throated green warbler feeds on the middle of the tree. The Cape May warbler feeds just strictly at the top of the tree. The bay-breasted warbler again at the middle of the tree, and the yellow rump warbler focuses on the base or bottom of the tree. Each species then minimizes competition basically by spending half of its time in these distinct areas. It's a unique way of adapting to sharing a limited resource between a species that occupies the same niche. So the predator-prey relationships are another ways in which species interact. When an individual of one species, the predator, feeds directly on another plant or animal species, that's known as a predator-prey relationship. This definitely has a strong impact on population of species. Herbivores can walk right up to their prey and eat them, known as plants. Carnivores have a variety of methods of capturing their prey. They can run and fly, they can work together to hunt, they can ambush, they might use camouflage, and they can attack with chemical warfare. The big cats pictured here, like the tiger, the leopard, and the cheetah, as well as the lion, are known to rely on ambush and the element of surprise to catch their prey. Cheetahs have an obvious advantage with their speed up to 60 miles per hour. Yet interestingly, they still only catch their prey half of the time. Wolves, as pictured here surrounding this bison, hunt in packs and can take down an enormous bison weighing almost 2,000 pounds or 1 ton. The army ant, as depicted here, feeding on a green katydid, is very efficient. A single colony of army ants can capture up to 30,000 prey items in just one day. Dragonflies, as pictured here, have recently been studied by researchers, and in 2012, Harvard University researchers found that dragonflies catch up to 95% of the prey that they chase. So they're studying what mechanism these dragonflies are using to be so successful in their prey hunting scenario. This is the Asian giant hornet, and 1 or 2 stings from this hornet can actually prove to be fatal to humans. However, rarely do they attack humans. Instead, they prefer to wreak havoc on colonies of honeybees. A group of no more than 30 of these Asian giant hornets are considered incredibly talented killers and can wipe out an entire colony of 30,000 honeybees in just a few hours. Even more disturbing is that these Asian giant hornets prefer to swoop down on their prey. They use their front mandibles to decapitate their targets. These Asian giant hornets can grow up to 2 inches in length and are capable of stinging a human through a rain jacket. What's more, the venom in the stinger is designed to break down the cells in the flesh, and they can send searing, intense pain through your nerve cells. So this is definitely a unique hunting insect. The top right corner is a picture of the peregrine falcon, and this bird can dive at speeds up to 190 miles per hour while hunting smaller birds. I have a picture here in the bottom right. This is not a wolf, this is a coyote, and they also hunt in packs. And I have 2 pictures of carnivorous plants that feed on other animals. So it's not just mammals and insects and reptiles and amphibians that are predators. You can have plants that are predators as well. There are many different coping strategies that prey put into practice in order to ward off predators. The simple ones are running, swimming, or flying fast. So for example, the pronghorn in the top right corner is one of the fastest land animals at 60 miles per hour in order to escape predators like wolves or mountain lions. Also, some species have highly developed senses of sight, hearing, and smell in order to keep them on guard to detect predators and be able to escape. Some species have a physical form of protection such as shells or thick bark or spines, and examples of this would be the armadillo, the tortoise, and the porcupine, as well as thorny plants, and they guard themselves against predators with these physical protections. Camouflage is also a means, which is depicted here with the spanworm and the walking stick, as well as this walking leaf insect. They basically look camouflaged and resemble the shape of something else, either by looking like a leaf or a twig, or the color themselves helps them blend in. Some species use chemical warfare, where they synthesize their own toxin through their own metabolic processes, or they accumulate toxin from the food that they eat. Here's a picture of a poison dart frog that can secrete poison from the glands scattered all over its body. Also, the spray of the skunk can help ward off predators just based on a bad smell that's being emitted. Here's an example of the fire salamander that makes a nerve poison that it can squirt out of the glands on its back. And the monarch butterfly accumulates toxins within it from the foods that it eats. And when birds go to feed on the monarch butterfly, they realize that it tastes bad and they don't pursue it in the future as a prey insect. This stonefish pictured here in this marine environment is actually armed with spines on its back, as well as using camouflage, and it can emit a sting that basically has victims begging to have their legs cut off. One person described the sting as having each knuckle and wrist and elbow and shoulder being hit with a sledgehammer through the course of over an hour. Most people have no idea that there are actually venomous mammals out there. Some just use poison from plants and prime their claws to get poison on their claws, but some actually produce it. And this small guy here, the duck-billed platypus, actually produces its own poison in the spurs on its hind legs, so its claws. So there are grooves in them which have channels of venom, and it secretes them whenever it's being threatened. I'll cover these last 3 examples of how prey copes with predators in the next short video.